All right, joining me as always on a Monday night, our terrific panel, Sky News hosts and contributor Liz Storer and Joe Hildebrand.
Hello, how are you,
See you both.
Great to be
Liz, very quickly before we get on to the other topics, what do you think about this? The school inviting Jenny Leong in to hand out prizes to Year 7 students.
Well, is it any surprise? It was in Victoria also that we saw the unions get involved with the massive school walkouts. That's when the horse really bolted in terms of government had an opportunity to say, we are not okay with this kind of activism in our schools. And now a school thinks it's perfectly appropriate to invite someone like her, who has spouted on several occasions outright Jew hatred, to present at a ceremony
a speech
attended by hundreds of students and parents. But what this really speaks to is the idiocy of collective guilt, because even if those here in Australia, including Jenny Leong, actually believe that the Israeli government is some sort of genocidal death cult, that has nothing to do with everyday Jewish people
100%.
living here in Australia, just trying to go about their daily business and live peaceful lives.
Not to mention students at schools.
It's worth noting that Fort Street also isn't just any old public high school. It's an elite public high school. It's a selective school. It's regarded as the sort of very pinnacle of educational success. So if the pinnacle of educational success is getting a tap on the shoulder from someone who thinks that Jews are octopuses who, spread their tentacles throughout society, which is straight out of the sort of Nazi ideological and image playbook, God help us all.
Yeah, it's the international Jewish conspiracy just being spouted to impressionable
elders of the Protocols of Zion. She must have looked it up on the internet.
Unbelievable.
All right, let's move on to the breaking news tonight. This is an inside story in The Nightly, a new digital website, new digital newspaper. It reveals that even Labor insiders were surprised that Anthony Albanese made the Voice referendum a first-term priority on election night. This story by the former editor-in-chief of The Australian, Christopher Daw, says that Anthony Albanese stunned Labor colleagues by ignoring explicit advice warning against declaring the Voice referendum a first-term priority on election night, and has been cursed by the call ever since. The Nightly can reveal Indigenous Affairs Minister Linda Burney was even worried during the 2022 election campaign about the likelihood of a Voice referendum being rejected if Labor couldn't get bipartisan support. Joe Hildebrand, does this align with what you've heard, that Labor insiders were shocked to hear the Prime Minister, in his election night speech, commit to the Voice referendum?
Yeah, I have to say it certainly does. My jaw hit the floor when I saw it. I remember that moment with just crystal clear clarity, despite being a few beers in on election night, very late. And I just thought, oh my God, where did this come from? This simply wasn't on the agenda. It was nothing that I'd heard in all my talks with various people high up. I can understand why he said it and why he felt the need to say it, because he'd run a small target strategy. Suddenly he's got, hundreds of the cheering faithful going elbow to elbow at the Canterbury-Helston Park RSL club, and you want to be able to say, this is what I'm going to do. And
to
suddenly
get even
all that
more cheers.
that's right. And suddenly, that's right. You should never go for likes and you should never go for cheers. But I guess suddenly all that discipline throughout the campaign that got Albo elected just disappeared in the sort of hot-bloodedness of the moment. So I can completely
had too many sherbets.
I can completely understand it, but it was the first and arguably the biggest of many errors throughout the campaign. And again, there are plenty of people who should take a slice of that cake. There's plenty of blame to go around. But yeah, it was a huge shock to me and to virtually everyone I know in the Labor Party. There are reports that one or two people knew on the night, maybe shortly before he said it. But I'm not even sure if that's true. Certainly, I without sounding like a wanker, I tend to know most things that are going to happen, and it was just a...
well, Joe, where are the stories? If you know everything that's going to happen.
No, that's right. Tomorrow...
Stop holding out on us.
On your mobile phone favourites, speed dial.
Well, it's not so much that, but I've sort of got a vibe for... hasn't the vibe been serving...
I thought you didn't want to sound like a wanker, Joe.
No, that's right. But you get a sense like that it was so jarring because it was against every single theme, every single message, every single priority of the campaign. It was something that had barely been spoken of at all during the campaign.
And if his nearest and dearest...
So. And then suddenly it's like number one, first thing we're going to do.
Well, it's not only that they didn't know about it, but this piece by Christopher Daw reveals that actually he ignored the advice of many senior people in Labor not to move ahead with the Voice, and he went ahead anyway. What does that tell you about the Prime Minister's ability to accept advice?
I tell you what, he must be very, very sorry he didn't take it now. But the kind of confidence that it takes, and given that his nearest and dearest were blindsided on the night, so were the Australian people. This isn't something that he'd campaigned on all that heavily. This isn't something the Australian people had gone to the ballot box going, yeah, actually, I want a Prime Minister who's going to talk about nothing but this for the first 18 months of his term while we're in a cost of living crisis, while we've got, so much unrest going on in the world. We've got China breathing down our necks. Yeah, this is the guy that I want to vote for. But the kind of confidence it takes, talk about poor judgment. This is poor judgment on steroids. We know that only 8 out of 45 referendums in this country have ever got up. And here's this brand new Prime Minister, not even 24 years old, going, yep, first term election promise, I have nothing else to say.
Right.
So this is what I'm going to throw out there.
It was a genuine thing. I don't think it was a cynical manoeuvre. I think he does have a lot of confidence. I think it was something he genuinely wanted to do. And again, let's not forget that over 60% of Australians were backing the Voice until the campaign started.
If it's something that he genuinely wanted to do, all he had to do was drop the constitutional change part.
Or he should have just told people about it during the election. Let's move on, though.
Honesty.
The PM did have a busy weekend, at least on the social front. As you probably know by now, he spent Friday night in Sydney with his fiancée and adult son, shaking it off to Taylor Swift. Then on Melbourne, he attended a private concert by Katy Perry at Anthony Pratt's mansion. Look, the PM's been criticised on social media for all of this, Joe. There have been comments like Australians are suffering price increases in supermarkets, energy, and the PM's on vacation. Someone else is saying most of us couldn't afford a ticket to Taylor Swift, and meanwhile other people would have loved to have gone but couldn't get tickets for their children. The PM's defended the fact that he went to both of those functions, but is this the best look? And fair enough, he goes to a concert, but it's the Dunkley by-election on Saturday, so do you think that that's probably wasn't the best time?
I can understand why a lot of people on the right would be furious at the hypocrisy of the entire Twitterati left pouring onto Scott Morrison, saying how outrageous it was that he took a Christmas holiday with his family while there were bushfires in Australia. I was not one of those people who jumped on that bandwagon, and I said then, and I therefore have a clean slate to say now, that we want our politicians, and especially our political leaders, our prime ministers, to be normal people. We want them to have holidays so they don't go insane. We want them to have family lives. We want them to have love lives. We want them to be able to pop the question to the woman they love. We want them to be able to have a break. Yes, when there are big major events in Australia, the Australian Prime Minister is going to be invited to them, and sometimes he is going to go. So yes, you will see him at the Australian Open final. You will see him at Taylor Swift. You will see him at the grand final, I'm sure. And if there's the South Sydney Rabbitohs games that he hasn't been at, I'm yet to find a bet. But the point is, you want that. That doesn't mean that he's not working all the time on other things. And if you say, well, you're not allowed to do anything that's not 24/7 work when anything bad is happening anywhere, then you're just never going to get anyone. And it will send you insane. I mean, who probably worked more hours than any other Prime Minister in the last 20 years was Kevin Rudd. Look how that turned out.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Meanwhile, former PM Scott Morrison, Liz, also went and he posted a video on Insta of him boogieing along to Taylor Swift. I think we've got that video coming up.
Oh, God, no.
There you go.
Of course, he's been defended for this, though, saying, well, he's got 2 young daughters, so of course he's a Swiftie. Of course he would have taken the opportunity to take them along, whereas Albo's just got a teenage son, so how dare he?
His son's in his 20s, I think. He's not a teenager anymore.
Oh, there you go. Okay, he's a bit older than I thought. But
I'm surprised Nathan was caught on camera. I would have been...
Taylor Swift as well.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But the irony of the position that Albo finds himself in now, he would have gone along to the concert being like, yeah, look, I'm a man of the people. I love Taylor Swift too. That's backfired spectacularly, which I do think is unfair, given 608,000 Aussies have attended Taylor Swift concerts over her tour this year. So how on earth does that make you like, I couldn't get get along, therefore how dare you. As for the partying with millionaires, to anyone surprised by that, I'd say I am so sorry it has taken this long for any illusion that those elites in power in our country don't do that kind of thing from time to time. Some consider it part of the job.
Now, let's look at this new recycling tax. This was an exclusive in The Australian. Reports, Joe, that it's on the cards, with recyclables exporters warning that the new regulations would come in soon and force them to pass on millions in extra costs to consumers. Is this...
Yeah, there's a bit of a sort of long and winding road in this one, isn't there? But basically, I think that the intent of this, the government's not calling it a recycling tax, right? So the industry...
They never do call it what it is.
I know. But this is the industry getting ahead of the policy and saying, if we're forced to do this, we will have to, our arm will be twisted, we'll have to pass the costs on to consumers, which means that in effect, it will be, well, then you would just say that any cost that you impose on any industry ever is a tax, because they say, well, we have no choice but to pass it on to consumers. Having said that, putting that aside, it seems to be, the problem has been, of course, we know that we've been recycling all our stuff dutifully. I'm OCD about it. You put your bottles and your cans and your papers out, and it goes shipped off to China or Indonesia, then no one ever sees it again. No one knows what happens. No one knows if it's just set fire to. No one actually knows if it's getting recycled. And so the government is trying to put in place a better oversight regime and then recoup the cost for that through this recycling tax that it isn't. But having said all that, I think the real point is we now know why Anthony Albanese went to Anthony Pratt's party on the weekend. Because the biggest recycler by a country mile is Visy, and it's paper and cardboard recycling that wants the exemption to these measures. So you can imagine the conversations that went on while Katy Perry was singing "You're Gonna Hear Me Roar."
I don't think anyone was talking about recycling while Katy Perry was singing. But I've heard about people like this who are OCD about the recycling, and every little container and bottle top, they're separating into all the different... I can't imagine that no one has the time.
At the first house, at our house now, the first week we moved in, we missed the recycling, right? And because we didn't know the days, obviously, and got mixed up. I took everything out of the recycling bin, put it in the back of the car, drove to our old house and put it in that recycling bin, because I just couldn't handle it just sitting there.
If you did your homework on where it actually goes and how much of it is actually recycled, you would lose your passion in a big hurry. I mean, so much of it is farcical.
I know, and that is
as it is. And then the idea that they're going to pass costs on to the consumer for having yellow bins that nobody asked for anyway. This was always a government initiative, and we're all for more sustainability. But when you're making these kinds of rules and regulations that everyday people who there's no opt-in or out option have to then pay for when life's expensive enough.
But the government's not making us pay for it. The industry, the government's saying, no, hang on a minute, you've been doing this on the cheap and not actually being accountable for where it ends up or checking that your supply lines as to where it actually ends up.
It's a new recycling tax.
Please.
There will be no recycling tax under the government, Eileen.
Now, very quickly before we go, now we're laughing, and this is actually a serious topic, but Barnaby Joyce is taking the week off the parliamentary sitting. He's now revealed that he has a sleeping issue as well.
Not on the night.
Not on that night.
Well, maybe that's why he was having a snooze on the pavement that evening.
Sleep talking.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, the Nationals leader, David Littleproud, has said that, he needs the time off because he has this sleep disorder. According to Barnaby, it's not a drinking problem, it's sleep apnea. A lot of people suffer from sleep apnea. A lot of wives or husbands struggle to sleep, seriously, when their partner has sleep apnea. So, do you think this is going to garner some more sympathy for him, Liz?
I don't know. I feel like as this story unfolds, it just becomes almost less credible. So we were told that he was on medication for something at the time, so he wasn't actually that drunk. It was a combination, a cocktail of factors. Why wouldn't you have just told us that at the time? At the time, we were told that it was kind of like taking personal medication. Now we find out it was just sleep-related. Why wouldn't you just say that? Like you say, thousands of people struggle with sleep apnea.
And they're not all passing out on the pavement swearing into their phone.
I know them personally, and they just sleep with an apparatus that helps.
Oh my God, my whole family's got it. It's the most annoying thing in the world.
Yeah, lots of kids have it as well, by the way.
So I just find it makes it less credible.
The problem is, and yes, the excuses have sort of varied a bit and became, was he on medication or was he just tired because he hadn't been able to sleep because you have to keep waking up in the night? Or, again, there's not many medications where, you have it and then you have, one glass of wine and suddenly you're flat on your back on the middle
You still have to have drunk a lot.
But you don't have to. But again, this guy doesn't need to be crucified for this. This is the thing. Like, it is a victimless crime. Yeah, it's a bit embarrassing. He's not hurting anyone. It's not like Lydia Thorpe when she's running out, abusing people or screaming at people and accusing them of all sorts of things. He's just a bloke who's had too much to drink. I reckon all of us, but for the grace of God, have been in that position, you know, for better or worse, at some point over our lives. And
Speak for yourself, Joe.
Well, maybe I've done enough for everybody else.
You're on the desk with two responsible.
Yeah, well, I know plenty of people. I know plenty of very respectable, lovely women who have had a little bit too much and then gone on to tut others. No one on this desk, I have to say.
Thank you.
And I've done the rest.
There you go. Joe Hildebrand, Liz Story. We'll see you at 10 o'clock
Sharri.
tonight. Thank you both so much.